welcome to the Sharon Avodas HaParsha in the beautiful neighborhood of Shari Chesed, in the wonderful Kehillah of Avram, which got new chairs, which people can see somewhat, right? The beautiful chairs that are there. And may the base midrash continue to fill the chairs with people who are learning and growing and davening as they do. Okay, in Parshas Pinchas, we start off as a continuation of what happened in Parshas Balak, where, according to the advice of Bilam, so Midyani women were sent to cause Am Yisrael to sin. And one of them, who came from royalty, Cosbi Bastsur Nasi Midyan, she was a Midianite princess, what you call. So she was taken by Zimri, who was the Nasi of Shevet Shimon, and then Pinchas, right, fulfilled that halacha. That is a very strange halacha that Aboel Aramis Kanoim Pogimbo, that one who has relations with that non-Jewish woman, that only a person on that particular level of kanoi, right, is able to carry out that sentence. It's interesting when Farshim asked, why did she have to be killed? She didn't do anything wrong. In other words, if she was single, right, Bnei Noach also have an idea of adultery for a married woman. There are different answers for it, but I just like to point out the question that it's asked. Now, when the Torah recaps it here, it describes her in an interesting way. It describes her as Al Dvar Cosbi Bas Nesi Midyan Achosom. Right? It says that we went to war against Midyan because of what they did to us, and because of what happened with Cosbi, the daughter of the Nasi, the prince, king of Midyan, their sister. Now, this idea of sister applies in a variety of different psukim. Here, the midrash, it's in a few midrashim. This one's in Breshis Rabbah because it talks about Shimon and Levi, right, who were Achei Dina, the brothers of Dina. The Torah describes them. When after Dina was abused by Shechem, so the Medrash asked, what, she was only the sister of Shimon and Levi? She was the sister of all the Shvatim. Because these two brothers gave their lives to help her, to save her, therefore she's called on their name. Also Miriam, Hanavia Achos Aaron. Miriam, the sister of Aaron. Wasn't she also the sister of Moshe, asked the Medrash? But Aaron, Nosan Nafsho Aleha, right, that he, right, gave himself over so much to ask that she be healed when she had tzaras, right, to help her. So therefore, she's called the sister of Aaron. Meaning, when the Torah mentions sister, it means that a person has really given themselves over in a particular way, and therefore the Torah refers to them as a sister. Now here, right, this Cosbi Bas Nasi Midyan, she came to do terrible things to Am Yisrael. Not only to lead them to sin, but to lead them to sin in order for them to be destroyed. And as a result of that campaign, right, there were 24,000 Jews who were killed. So the Medrash asks, why does it call her their sister? Wasn't she just Bas Umasa Noisa? She was just another Midyanite, like every other Midyanite. El Lafisha Nosna Nafsha Olumasa. She gave her life for her nation. Please.
The 24,000.
Yeah.
Why did they have to say?
Why did they? Because they ended up having relations with these non-Jewish women, which didn't stop there. They actually got them to serve their Avodah Zarah also. Right? It was a big tragedy. So here it says she gave her nefesh, she gave her life for her nation, meaning she was royal. She came, in fact, the Medrash says that her father told her, if you're going to be doing this, but only be with somebody royal from the Jews. At least don't debase yourself so much. That's why she ended up with Zimri, who was in the sea of Shimon. But she, so to speak, gave everything she had. She shamed herself. She was killed eventually. She did it for a nation. The Torah marks that down. The Torah wants us to notice that as something positive. And that's why she's called Achos. That's why she's the sister. So the Tolna Rebbe pointed this out. He said, we have to pay attention to this. This is fascinating. Because we tend to see people as black or white, good or bad. Here we have someone who did something so bad that had such terrible results for us even, but the Torah points out a positive aspect of her behavior. She was devoted to her people. She was willing to sacrifice herself for her people. She was willing to give up her kavod for her people. And therefore, we have to transpose that to ourselves, to realize that every small aspect of good which we do is important. And every Jew, certainly, alachas kama v'kama, not someone who's coming to destroy us like this Midyanite woman, but a Jew, whatever wrong things they're doing, if they have something right, it's important. And the Torah wants it to be noticed. Another example of this from a previous Parsha. Right? In Chukas, it says that Am Yisrael had to go to war with Og Melech HaBoshem. Now, the Pasuk tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem told him, Al tira oso, don't be afraid of Og. Why should Moshe Rabbeinu be afraid of him? So Rashi brought down from Chazal, he was afraid to fight him because Chazal identify Og as the palit, as the refugee who came when there was the war of the 4 kings against the 5, and Lot was taken captive. Og escaped, and he came to Avram. It says, Vayavo palit, and he told Avram that they took your nephew, Lot, captive. So Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid, Shema tamud zchuso. Maybe that merit would stand in good stead for him, and we wouldn't be able to defeat him in war. So the Chizkuni, right, Rishon, one of the Mefarshim in the Torah, asks, he says, why was Moshe Rabbeinu afraid? Right? In other words, Rashi himself brought down there that Og had an ulterior motive. He came hoping that Avram Avinu would go to war and get killed, because the odds were certainly going to be against him. And he would take Sarah, and he would marry him. So here, the one thing that the Torah is, he was a wicked person. The Torah is pointing out one thing that he did positive, and even that positive was done with ulterior motives. And nonetheless, ad kedei kach, that Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid that we wouldn't be able to defeat him in war because of that. If you stack up the schuyos of Moshe Rabbeinu, all of his merits against Og's one thing that he did in ulterior motive, and yet he says, Yesh Lomar, says the Chizkuni, Da'afilu hochi zchus lo. Even with that ulterior motive, that is something of merit for him. He says in the Gemara, tells us, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, La'olam yasu karim, b'torah mitzvos afilu shelo lishma. The Torah tells us that we are supposed to do Torah and mitzvos, learn Torah, do mitzvos, even when it's not for its own sake. Right? And they bring the example, Bischara boim u'shtayim korbanos shehikriv Balak melech Moav. Last week's Parsha, Balak is bringing all these korbanos. It says in the merit of those korbanos that he was bringing in order to help Bilam curse Am Yisrael, Zocha v'yotztu himenu Rus, Pito shel Eglon. Right? His descendant was Rus, from whom came David HaMelech, from whom came Moshiach. Right? It says, Rus Bito shel Eglon ben Beno shel Balak melech Moav. That was her lineage. Therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid. Shemotamud lo aschus shehigid la'Avramo ivri kinish ba'achiv. Avram Avinu was afraid. He did something good. Maybe that means we can't defeat him. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Al tira oso, don't be afraid. Now that seems very strange to us. You know, there is something positive there, but to the extent that Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid that it would be so powerful that he couldn't lead Am Yisrael to war against Og. So the Tolna Rebbe pointed out this fascinating Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva, which tells us the following, and it's very key to remember. Rambam says, just make a little order here. Rambam says, he talks about the idea of a person who has more avonos than schuyos, more wrongdoings than good deeds, right? So that person is called a Rasha. Talking about in Tshuva and the din of Rosh Hashanah, a person with more good deeds than wrong deeds. So that's a person that's tzaddik, a person where it's even is a Beinoni, and much, much Torah on that. Now, the Rambam says, you can't count up your averos and mitzvahs. Even if you're the most orderly person in the world, and very self-aware. And all day you're marking down, okay, I did this mitzvah, I did this avera. At the end of the year, you do your count, you say, okay, I did 2,327 mitzvahs and 1,460 averas. That means that I'm a tzaddik. Says, you can't do that cheshbon. Why? Says, Shikol ze eino lefi minyan hazchuyos v'avonos. The weighing of these things isn't numerical, it isn't quantitative on the amount of good deeds and misdeeds. Elafi godlon. It's according to their magnitude, it's qualitative. There can be one good thing that you did that outweighs many averas because it was very difficult for you. Correct. Nachon, right? That's the yesh avon, and there can be an avera you really could have easily resisted, and you didn't. That might be counter to kamas chuyos. It might outweigh many good things you did. So he said, "Ein shoklin ela b'daito shokel deos." Who can make this calculation? Who can weigh these things? Only Hashem, who knows these things. Who are yodea heich orchin aschiyos keneged avonos? Only Hashem knows how a merit can be weighed against averos. So therefore, the Tolna Rebbe said, now we can see why Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid, because he says, I simply don't know. Og did something positive. How much does it weigh? I don't know. Right? Maybe it can weigh enough that we wouldn't be able to be successful in battle. Only Hashem knows. And that's why he needed Hashem to reassure him of this. Now, we find something fascinating. There's another Maramakum in the Tolna Rebbe, and this is in the Shulchan Aruch in the Mishnah Berurah. And this now brings it to us and to each of us and to each little thing we do. The Mishnah Berurah is talking about the laws of zimun, which means when people ate together, if you have 3 people that ate together, so they join together and they make the zimun, where one person says, Rabbi Sayin Avarich, and they do together. If you have 10 people, so then you mention the name of Hashem as well. And in Siman Kuf Tzadi Tes, it talks about Al mi mezamnim v'al mi ein mezamnim. Who can be included in a zimun and who's disqualified? So they talk about, right, the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is, it says, Ama oretz gomor mezamnin olav bezman hazeh. And Ama oretz gomor, a total ignoramus, not just someone who's ignorant, but a person who could have learned and intentionally didn't. Nonetheless, we include him in the zimun. Mishnah Berurah explains why. If we would separate from these people, so then they would separate and they would distance themselves from Torah more. They must be included. Now, here in the Bir Halacha, he brings a fascinating thing. He says that there are certain people, right, that if the person really does serious averas publicly, intentionally, right, to the extent that we wouldn't include him in the zimun, right, that this person would have a title, let's say, of a Rasha, right? Again, we have to give certain halachic definitions to people. Again, the way Hashem calculates is the way Hashem calculates. But there are certain behaviors that Chazal tell us make this person disqualified from us including him in our zimun. Nonetheless, he says, all of this is if we are able to include him, meaning, again, I'm saying we, I'm not saying that I'm not a Rasha, just for an example, could be I am. But 2 people, 2 kosher Jews, are sitting at a table, they had a meal together with one person who is this terrible Baal Avera. So they cannot make a zimun. He cannot be that 3. However, he says, but he himself is obligated in zimun, right? Meaning, let's say we have 3 kosher Jews and this one Rasha eating together, and now the one Rasha wants to get up and leave. Say, no, you can't leave yet. You're obligated to answer the zimun. Like, are you kidding? No, really, right? That's your obligation. You ate together with us. You can't make the 3, but you're obligated. Or the second scenario he brings, 3 Rishonim ate together, right? 3 Rishonim ate together. Now it's not a question of other people bringing him in. He said they're obligated to make their own zimun. right? So you come to these people, you have there a couple mafiosos and one who knows what, and you say, by the way, guys, when you finish eating, right here in the bench, we'll show you, make a zimun. So this sounds to us a little bit ridiculous. It sounds to us like a person who's on trial for murder, and the prosecutor takes out a book and he says, and your honor, he's had this book overdue from the library for 3 weeks. This, right, we're talking about a person who's done terrible things intentionally, publicly, and you're saying it makes a difference if he leaves right before the zimun, if he makes a zimun. So the Bir Halacha, the Mishavuri, brings down a fascinating letter from the Rambam. The Rambam writes in a letter. Yeah, please.
Couldn't you say that if he's willing to join you for the Zimun,
He's not such a rush.
so he's like a tzaddik at that moment?
It's interesting, right? There are stories about a person that, like at a given moment, the famous story of the Chozeh Midyan when somebody lit Hanukkah candles. On the other hand, we can't change a halachic status just because of that. We are careful in halacha also of people trying to, so to speak, launder themselves, like coming and giving a big amount of tzedakah, even though they killed a few people and stuff like that. So here's what the Rambam says in the Tshuva. He says, Afilu Yeravam ben Nevat. Yeravam ben Nevat is the first king of Yisrael when it's split off after Shlomo HaMelech. He's always brought as a classic example of Chote Umachtias Yisrael. Not only did he sin, he caused Am Yisrael to sin. He put up agolim, he put up golden calves in Don in the north, in Beersheba in the south. He wouldn't let Am Yisrael go to the Beis HaMikdash, and plenty more things, right? Now, the Rambam says, even though he already served Avodah Zarah, Afal Pichen, nonetheless, Ye'onesh gam al kalos kagon eruve tavshilin v'kadome. Meaning, Yeravam is there, he just finished serving his Avodah Zarah. And now it's coming Yom Tov, and there's going to be Shabbos right after Yom Tov. So say, Yeravam, you're going to want to prepare for Shabbos, cooking on Yom Tov, you have to make an Erev Tavshilin. If you don't, that's the wrong thing to do. I just served Avodah Zarah. I caused Am Yisrael to serve Avodah. You're talking about Erev Tavshilin? So he says, yes, right? This is what he brought. And so therefore, he says, and such a thing is even brought in the Shita Mekubetzes as well. Now that's on the negative side, so to speak. But what the Tolna Rebbe said is, now if you look at it, the positive side, what that means, if no matter how bad you've been, the next small bad thing you do makes a difference. So certainly the next good thing you do makes a difference. And we know that Midah Tova Meruba, that the good is always more powerful than the bad. So all of this shows us, just like that good thing that Cosby did, the Torah points her out as having been a wicked woman, but there's something positive she did. You have to acknowledge it. You have to learn from it. Og Melech HaBosham. What he did was helpful to Avram, but he did it with an ulterior motive, and he himself was an evil person nonetheless. That's a merit. How big a merit? We don't know. Hashem knows. So we can't measure these things, and the Torah wants us to see and to notice this. Now this brings us to a famous Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin. In Masechet Sanhedrin, Perek Ben Sora Umar, it deals with the very difficult halachic cases of when a person gives up their life, when someone wants them to do an avera, when they don't. And they bring the case of a Jew who is there. And let's assume for our scenario, the Jew is the greatest Talmid Chacham and Tzaddik in the generation. And a guy comes over to him and he says, Rabbi, excuse me for interrupting your learning. I'm going to tell you the following. I have a gun here, and I have one for you. Now, you see that Jew over there? That Jew is a drug dealer, right? And he's an adulterer, and he's a murderer. And I want you to kill him. If not, I will kill you. That's the question, right? Here we have, right, the greatest tzaddik in Am Yisrael, the greatest Talmid Chacham. Here we have the lowlife of the lowlifes. Somebody's going to die. Obviously, we would want to pick the tzaddik to live. No, he's not allowed to do it. He's not allowed to do it. Why? The Gemara says svarahu. It's a reasoning. And the reasoning is explained with something that became a famous expression. My chazi dedama didok sumak tfei. Why does it appear to you that your blood is redder than his? Dilma dama didei sumak mididach. Maybe his blood is redder than yours. We're saying, who are we kidding? It should be quite obvious, right? Can't we make such a value judgment? Says Rashi, svarahu, it's a logic, shlotidche nefesh chavero, that the life of his friend shouldn't get, so to speak, thrown away. Diika tarte ibud, diika tarte, there will be two wrongdoings. Ibud neshama, somebody's going to die, va'avera, and you'll be doing the avera of murder. Why? He says, if you just let yourself be killed, so there'll be the loss of a Jewish life, that's true, but there won't be an avera, okay? Because the Torah tells you not to commit murder, but that is one of the three averas that you have to give up your life for. So even though a life will be lost, at least an avera is not being done. Now, he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu in general tells us, v'chai b'him. We're supposed to live in the mitzvahs. That's why it's only rare cases that a Jew would have to give up his life. Why is that? Because mishum diyakara be'einav neshama shel Yisrael. The life of a Jew is so precious to Hashem. So he says, v'hacha gabe rotzeach. So now when we have the case of killing, of murder, sof sof ika ibud neshama. One Jewish neshama is going to be lost. Lama yehi muter laver. Why should he be able to do the avera of killing someone? Mi yodea shenafshu chaviva leyotzo yotzer minefesh chavero. How can he know if his nefesh, if his life is more precious to Hashem than that other Jew? Hilkoch, right? Therefore, the words of Hashem that we cannot kill cannot be overlooked here, and he has to let himself be killed. So this is pointed to in many places, meaning we can't know. Every Jew who's alive, HaKadosh Baruch Hu intentionally made him alive that morning. He gave him that life. He's not just there by inertia. He's not just there by an afterthought or by this. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave every Jew life there. That means that Hashem wants that Jew alive. And Jews are precious to Hashem. Who's more precious? Who's less precious? We have no way of judging it because, as the Rambam says, we have no way of weighing these things. So let's try to get to the positive bottom line for us. So many times, right, the Yitzhara tries to get us to not want to do something because we think, what difference is that going to make? What difference is it going to make? There's so many things like in life. If I owe somebody $100,000 and I'll tell them I can pay you back $5, what difference is that going to make? But when it comes to Torah and mitzvahs, there's no such thing. Each small thing we do, we can't measure the smallness or the bigness of it. Each thing that we're there, if we're here, if we're alive, if we can do it, it's something which is powerful. It's something which is needed. And we shouldn't treat cheaply the mitzvah of any Jew, right? However and when it's done, and certainly not our own. Official Schechter tells this strange story about a Jew who told him, he said he was up in the Catskills, right? This is where the Jews of New York go and migrate to in the summer. And there was a Jew there who, on Shabbos, his son had some medical problem, and he was told, you got to take him to the hospital right away. This was before Hatzalah, before cell phones, before all these things. So you have this man in his talus and shtreimel, jumps into his car, and he's driving him to whatever hospital. Suddenly he sees the blinking light on his dashboard. He remembered that Erev Shabbos, he said, I better fill up with gas because I'm on empty. And he's running on fumes. He pulls into a gas station. He doesn't have any money on him. Shabbos, he doesn't know what to do. Suddenly a car pulls in, like booming, blasting music. Two guys in there, two girls, and the car pulls up next to him. And one of the guys, looking not overly Jewish, goes, "Was it Geshen?" What happened? So he told him. So the guy takes out a 50. says mem, right? In Yiddish, take. And the man says, how can I pay you back? He says mana mitzvah. He says, my mitzvah. And he drove off. So again, these things seem to us, but we don't know the power of them. And we have to value them, and to see them in the power of a mitzvah then becomes mitzvah goreres mitzvah. Mitzvah leads to a mitzvah, schar mitzvah mitzvah. A mitzvah itself has built-in reward, which is mitzvah. And by our recognizing it and acknowledging it in ourselves and others, that enables that energy to go on. The Sfas Emes asked the question, it's a very depressing statement by Chazal. It's often pulled out now when it comes to the 3 weeks. Kol dor shebeis hamikdash lo nivna b'yamav, any generation that the Beis Hamikdash was not built in its days, ki'ilu charva b'yamav, as if it was destroyed in your days. So he said that can be very disheartening, because we had the generation of the Rambam and Rashi and the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon, and all those generations, seems like they weren't able to do it, right? And us, we're going to be able to do it. And that means that we're just basically destroying the Beis Hamikdash again in our generation. He says you have to read it differently. Kol dor shelo nivna Beis Hamikdash b'yomov. The Beis Hamikdash is built with days, with my day, with your day, with each day. It's built with days. The bricks are days. Days are bricks. Any generation that didn't add bricks, that's as if it was destroyed. But a brick can come from your smallest action.
Nivne doesn't necessarily mean completely built.
Right.
Finished.
The whole Beis Hamikdash is built in your time, in your era. It means to be built with your days, with those bricks. So value your bricks. Every little brick is a brick. And it's a process that every generation is building on and doing. And nobody can tell which brick is going to be the last one in that building. So that's what we have. May we be able to see it rebuilt.